to the CIPD. But we have an independent board which I chair with 9 senior HR professionals, including Kay, who's a speaker today. In normal times, we're well known for our live events and have been for years, with great networking, great evening events, lots of wine, canapes. I'm pleased to say we're going back to that format as well. It'll be a hybrid format from September. So watch this space, further details to be announced shortly. We're a not-for-profit organisation, and our model is based on commercial sponsorship, just to cover our running costs. And so if you can show the first slide, please, Denise. The first slide will show our current annual sponsors. It's coming shortly. Here we go.
Excellent.
We have the previous slide, please. There we go. So those are our current sponsors. A real mixture of practitioner, supplier organisations, and trade press and academics. Okay, can we introduce today's speakers then, please, and move on to the next slide. We've got some great speakers today for our webinar. We've got Tony Steen and Vicky Cutter from Healthcare Management Solutions, which is the UK's leading provider of care home management and consultancy services. Tony's chief exec. He's been there for nearly 17 years. He has an extensive track record of leadership in the care sector. And Tony's joined by Vicky, who's his group HR director. And together they've got a wealth of experience in running and advising care businesses. It's been a hugely challenging time for the sector, as I can testify myself, operating as HR director at Cornwall Care. And there have been many resourcing and operational challenges, now made even more problematic by the COVID pandemic. Tony and Vicky will be in conversation today with Kate Chohan, who's my colleague on the London HR Connection board. She's also the founder of Globe Research and the Inner Circle Boardrooms. And she's heavily involved as a business advisor and consultant in the sector. So now, without further ado, I'll hand over to Kay. Thank you very much, Kay.
Thank you, Craig. Hello, everybody. As Craig mentioned, my name's Kay Chohan. Delighted to have Tony and Vicky join us today. So what can you expect from our conversation today? Well, we're going to be covering a host of issues that are relevant to leaders and irrelevant of being within the care sector. So we'll be talking around things like turnarounds, Brexit and COVID as well. Tony, obviously you're the founder, owner and operator of Healthcare Management Solutions. You guys have a unique market proposition in that your clients are often investors to banks, operators, insolvency practitioners, and you guys operate in some of the most difficult care home and basically successfully turning them and transforming them into tradable, valuable businesses. Vicky, thank you very much for joining us today. I appreciate both of your time. I know you guys are busy because you guys have just taken on a new turnaround piece as well, which I'm really looking to deep dive and jump into. Ladies and gentlemen and our attendees, like Craig mentioned earlier, you will have an opportunity to ask questions. You can pop them into the comment section below, or you can raise your hand, and as and when we see them come through, we'll probably keep them towards the end and then and go through them. So let's just crack on. Tony, for the sake of our audience and Vicky, I know Craig's given pretty much a intro there. Is there anything that we've missed off, or Tony, if you just want to say a few words in terms of a bit about your background and sort of, you know, if, like I say, if there's anything I've missed off there.
No, great. Thanks, Kay, for a really warm welcome, and nice to be invited along today to say a few words. I started off my life as an accountant. Now, don't all switch off or go away. It sort of set me up as with a really good foundation for business. And I would describe myself now as more of a care home business entrepreneur than an accountant. And my journey has been, as most people's, I think, is these days, has been dictated largely by the jobs I've had and the opportunities that have come along at the time. When I finally decided to set up my own business many years ago, I now look back on that as probably the best thing I ever did, and in some days the worst thing I ever did. But we'll come to that. I like Craig's introduction as Vicky being my current HR director. I don't know if any of you out there have ever tried to get rid of an HR director. You can't. She'll be my HR director until I die. I can see that. Does a great job for me. I'll tell you a little bit about healthcare management solutions, and we'll go from a description of that, if I may, into some of the issues that we'll talk about today, hopefully. But healthcare management solutions is a management company first and foremost, but it also does consultancy work, inspection work, and develops systems for care home management, but primarily management. And we manage homes, as Kay said, for a variety of people, banks, insolvency practitioners, and so on, as she listed, but also long-term for investors. So if you want to operate care homes, but you don't actually want to operate care homes, it's an investment, we will do the management for you. That's a very well defined product within the leisure sector. So hotels have been run like that for many, many years, but not care homes. And so we are relatively unique. There are very, very few people who do what we do. I always say it's because it's a rubbish job and nobody else wants it. So we do come across, because of what we do, some, I think, more of those issues that most HR departments generally don't have to deal with on an ongoing basis. So a lot of what we do is around restructuring businesses, which involves a lot of reorganization, if I might say, often with redundancies, a lot of management of performance and that kind of thing. So there's a lot of HR work involved. We recently became the management team in place of an existing operators management team. Because of TUPE, they all came over to us. And the consequence of that has been that obviously we now have 2 of everybody, or whatever, or more in some cases, and we have to now go through a reorganization. So Vicky's in the middle of that at the moment. I'm amazed she's got any hair left. So that's the sort of unique position that we hold. Vicky, I'll just let you say a few words, and then Kay, if you want to fire off your starter for 10, no conferring.
Brilliant.
Thank you. So just to give a little bit of background into myself, I've probably been in HR now probably almost 20 years, I guess. When I think about it, it seems such a long time when I say it like that. But it's my passion, actually, and I absolutely love it. I've been working for HCMS now for almost 9 years. Not always in the HR director role, but been there for 9 years. And to be honest, it's a company that it's a different company that I've ever worked before. As Tony's explained, the way that we work, the setup that we have is really different, because you're working for and on behalf of different clients that have different views, different ways of working, the way they want you to work. So you've got to adjust yourself to the different needs of the client, and it's very different to what I've ever done before. I love it, don't get me wrong, I'm just saying it's very, very different. So it's just making sure that you know what that client wants, because if you're with one company and it's just one decision maker, it's a lot easier to plan. But when you're working for different clients with different needs, different opinions, different ideas, it just makes it a little bit more tricky. But to be honest, it's really varied for me. It's a real generalist role, which is what I love. So yeah, so it keeps me busy, it keeps me up at night, does sometimes get rid of my hair, but I wouldn't have it any other way. But it's just a different way of working, really.
Brilliant. So this is where you're going to get a grilling from me in regards to loads of questions. So the purpose of today, just to point out, is really to get some shared learnings. We want to learn about the strategies and approaches that you've used that have and haven't worked for you, and also see the world through the lens of your eyes. Obviously you work with various clients, and you, as you mentioned and highlighted, different criterias, appetite, all sorts. So let me start off with my first question with for you guys. What's the main pressure points for both of you, Tony, in your capacity as Chief Executive and Vicky as HRD, when you're taking on distressed turnaround portfolios, particularly during times like this?
Okay, well, I'll be unchivalrous and I'll go first. As CEO, the responsibility that the clients place with us is primarily to make their business a financial success, and quite often that, as I said earlier on, involves major changes around the workforce, particularly because it's the single biggest cost within the businesses that we operate. And I also say that the only way you're going to build any successful business is by building trust with your employees. So you're taking on businesses where the staff group are quite often demotivated and demoralized because the business has been seen as unsuccessful, and therefore somebody else has been brought in. They often, for different reasons, and I won't go into those, but often they don't have a lot of trust in management, and they've quite often failed as a business because actually the management's been lacking. So you're bringing in more management and more structure and more control and so on, which is never pleasant. So whatever anybody says, I was having this conversation this morning with a gentleman who rang me up with issues in his business. And I've got to the age of 56, I've given that away, but I know I don't look it, but I've got to the age of 56 and I've realized now that whatever anybody says about liking change, nobody likes change, and when we come in, it is all change. So how do you implement, this is my challenge, and this is what I rely on Vicky and the team for. So my challenge is, how do I build that trust and build a team that want to work, that feel valued, that trust us, that are prepared to change the culture quite often, work harder, and yet at the same time go through that really painful process of having to dismiss people, which is where it comes down to, either through performance management or redundancy. So it's really, really challenging. And I think that for me, one of the main things that I would bring to that is to say, it's like ripping off a Band-Aid. You're better off getting it done and moving through that quickly. To try and do that incrementally over a period of time is soul crushing for the staff. And ultimately over time, you lose that trust, because whatever you tell them, you've been telling them it for 6 months and people have kept walking out the door. And, are they next? Whereas if you get it done and you move past that, then people feel a bit more, it was horrible, but they feel a little bit more settled. So that's what I would say. I would say all of those things are issues. But, given that we've got to drive that financial performance, some hard choices have to be made, and you need to just bite the bullet and get on with it. I don't know what you'd say, Vicky.
So yeah, so from my point of view, I'm all about the people, and as Tony said, we do have to go through some difficult decisions and difficult restructuring. But I've had a lot of experience around TUPE, around redundancy, and honestly, I always find that if you're open and honest and transparent with the employees from the moment they come in or the moment we take over, it does make the process a lot easier. And that sounds very simple, just being open and honest, but a lot of the time they've gone through processes where that hasn't happened. So I'm always open and honest. I'm always trying to build trust, as Tony said, through good communication, the different avenues that we look at for communication. And I've, like I say, I've gone through a lot of processes like this, and I always try and make it as smooth as possible, even through a very difficult time for them. So building that trust, talking to them openly and honest, as a person, from one person to another, not just from a HR director to an employee, I found has really made a difference. And I'm going through a process like that at the moment. And a lot of the feedback that I've had is, I'm just so grateful that you're being honest with me and that you're telling me how it is. And that makes such a difference, because it's a hard process for them sometimes. You know, we're going through redundancy processes, restructuring, when we're asking them to look after some of the most vulnerable people in society, with our vulnerable adults, and we still expect them to do an amazing job and care for them as if they're going to be there long term, and often they're not. And a lot of the processes I've gone through is that not everybody, but 99% of people that I make redundant want to be there to the very last day. And that shows a lot to me. One, about the people that they are, because they care who they're looking after. But I would hope in some way that the process that we've gone through with them, that shows them that we respect them. Yes, we're having to make difficult decisions, but we are trying to do it the best way we can. And I think by them wanting to stay to the very end, and that last resident has left, you know, that building, they want to be there. And I really pride myself on being honest with them, because I want them to have a positive process. And that sounds awful, doesn't it? Because, you know, ultimately at the end they might not be there, but if they can go knowing that we've done a good process with them, that we've respected them for the work that they've done whilst they've been there, that's a good job done for me.
I will just say, Vicky, actually, there was a job not that long ago, in fact, very, very recently, where I was talking to one of the owners of the business who'd been told that at a meeting we had with the senior management team, we'd let it be known to them that the business was actually at risk, generally at risk. And, you know, he raised it and said to me, well, we've never told them that because it would have unsettled them. And I said, no, what it's actually done is it's shown that you don't trust them. Yeah. And we do. So, you know, we've told them because we want them to understand what's happening in the business and make them part of the process of recovery. You know, so I think people are grown up, you know, it's amazing how people respond when you treat them like an adult, they behave like an adult generally. That's the difference.
So we're talking quite a bit about, you know, turnaround situations, and there's going to be a lot of businesses like that for one reason or another, given the circumstances, and sometimes not their fault, just because of circumstance as well. So how are you tackling some of those people performance and management related issues, particularly in a low margin, low wage business such as a care sector like yourself?
Okay. Well, I'll let Vicky kick off with that one, because that's
I think one of the biggest things you have to do in an environment, like you say, that's low margin, low wage business, if you like, is to tackle them very early on. You know, we don't have the luxury of waiting. You know, if you're a big corporate company and somebody's not performing, yes, it's an issue, but it's probably can wait a little bit if it's not causing too much of a problem. In a care home like the homes we look after, that can't happen. You need to address it really as soon as possible. So for me, it's just getting in there, tackling that as soon as you can, not letting it fester. Because if you're letting it fester and you've got people in there that are not performing, it really does have an impact on the day-to-day running of that care home, and the impact of care that it's potentially giving, but also the impact that it has on other staff. So the biggest issue for me in tackling that is to get in there very quickly, rather than let it lie, really.
But I think the other thing that I would say, and I'd just add to that, Vicky, is that and we touched on this a little bit earlier, often the demise of the business is, and you know, this isn't about apportioning blame, but the demise of the business is generally because the people in the business, and most businesses are just a collection of people trying to achieve an objective, that the people aren't achieving that objective, and that's often because of poor direction, poor management. And one of the other things that's always struck me is that when people are given very clear instruction and direction, and they're helped to achieve what you're asking of them, they often rise to that. So one of the ways that we tackle underperformance is to make sure that everybody very early on is completely and utterly aware of what is expected of them, and those parameters are well set. often, and this scares the bejesus out of me, is that going into some businesses, you ask to see what people, can you provide us with everybody's job descriptions? And the answer is there aren't any. Now, working in HR, that's anathema to you all, but the reality is in many businesses, that's the way it is. And even if there are job descriptions, people have been there for so long that their job roles are completely and utterly different from the job descriptions that they had when they first started, which again says to me that nobody has actually sat down at any point and documented what's changed and what's now required of somebody. So especially small businesses tend to work organically, and they tend to grow organically, and things change, and the paperwork never follows on. I mean, I know a lot of you watching this webinar are in HR, and this is all familiar territory to you. But when you're tackling a business, and it's sometimes, maybe it's different. I don't know. This Vicky can answer. I can't. But maybe it's a lot to do with the CEOs or the entrepreneurs at the head of that business not thinking it's important. But nothing is more important than giving people clear direction and documenting what's expected of them, so that they know, and you can measure and monitor what their performance is like, and you can feedback. You can feedback very simply. This was asked of you. This is what we want of you. This is by when we need it, and so on and so forth. And then you can performance manage. If nobody's got a job description, you can't measure and monitor their performance. And therefore, when it comes to performance managing out the people that are not performing, how do you do that? So, it starts with that clarity.
Yeah,
people like boundaries, don't they?
It does. And also, for a lot of the HR people on this webinar, they will probably relate to this when I say it, but you often get managers come to you and say, oh, this person's not been performing, they've not done this, they've not done this. It's been going on for 6 months, and I say, okay, that's fine. Where's the documentation? Have you spoken to this person before? Give the clear expectations that Tony's talking about, any action plans. And a lot of the time, there's nothing in place. They've not actually documented anything, which sometimes can make things a little bit trickier in terms of the process and how long that takes to go through, which goes to my point about getting in there quickly, because, and that's probably education for the managers. And coaching with the managers to make sure that you have to address it, because if it comes to a point where they're no longer needed or shouldn't be in the business any longer, you've got to have that documentation to back it up. And that's what I think we have to get better at in terms of a management point of view, because it makes the process a lot easier if it's there.
Yeah. Just on that note, just to as a side note, and I know somebody on here, so I'm just going to do a quick shout out. Palvi, a lot of this is going to be related to your business at some point, as you guys grow. But I just wanted to know, do you guys do a lot of check-ins? I mean, obviously there's this whole conversation around, performance review and how that's being carried out. Is it on the spot? Is it quarterly? Is it annually? Have you guys changed any of that process? Obviously, when you're going into these businesses, often you're picking out people that are not suited for the future, but with those sticking around, so to speak, how are you managing that process with them?
Well, Vicky will give you the details, but absolutely. I mean, that's one of the fundamentals of what we do. We have audits that we apply. I'm talking specifically now about the care services. We have a very detailed audit process to understand the performance of the businesses that we operate. And in that audit program, there is a whole section on HR. And that section on HR is there to make sure that as part of the normal day-to-day operation of that business, where we're carrying out supervisions, and we're following up on those supervisions, and we're making sure that people are properly managed. And I think there's in the chat box, I notice Fraser's just raised an issue about how often as poor HR contributes to poor commercial performance of organisations. I would say almost all of the poor commercial performance, I mean, except for where there's an inappropriate financial structure behind that's killing the business. But other than that, generally it's poor HR, because whatever it comes down to, even if it's meds errors by nurses, if you're not managing that as an HR issue, then you're never going to be in a position to remedy the situation. It's ultimately it's the nurse it's the person carrying out that role of nurse that is responsible for that. So if they either need training, or they need mentoring, or they need monitoring and reminding and what have you, and then eventually, if they can't get it, they need replacing, and those are all HR matters that need to be dealt with.
Cool. So I want to talk about some other issues that are more recent as well. So how have your people management priorities shifted as a result of both COVID and Brexit?
Vicky, do you want to?
Yeah, I think in terms of COVID, I guess the way we manage before COVID and after COVID is similar. We've obviously had a big learning curve with COVID. A lot of people on this webinar would have gone through the same thing. It's been a huge learning curve in terms of people being out of business, whether it's furlough, whether it's isolation, and throughout the sort of from March to December, we had a massive impact in the business. But one of the things that I think we've got better at is more communication with our staff. Now, we have always communicated with our staff, don't get me wrong, but I think with COVID, we've really tried to do that a lot more. We've stepped that up a lot more in terms of how we communicate with them when we do that, put a lot more into mental health, well-being, and all of that was there before, but it just heightens the fact that we probably need to do it a bit more often, which we've been doing. But one of the things as well is that obviously with a lot of people being out of business, whether that's from our head office point of view and in the homes, it's left probably key people out of the business that we were dependent on, and that you have to really make sure that that knowledge that that person might have is in the business somehow, because you could just lose somebody for somebody had to shield for 12 weeks and they're gone. That leaves a bit of a gap, and it's just making sure that the management of the knowledge that we have is across the board rather than just with individuals, I've found, and I think that's something that we've had to look at.
I think it's fair to say as well, one of the bizarre results of the pandemic for us was that almost from February last year, when we actually had the care home, the first care home in the country that had a known COVID contact. So we were thrown into this really at the deep end in February, when there was no guidance from Public Health England and no guidance from CQC, and nobody had really started to pour out the information that came out subsequently. But we had to make it up on the spot. We got a phone call one day to say that the super spreader, who you'll have all heard of, who went to a conference and then went skiing in France and came back, the GP, had visited one of our residents in the care home and spent an hour in their room and then disappeared and then been tested positive, and we had to deal with that. But one of the bizarre consequences of all of this from February last year was that we had way less, almost no movement of staff. Staff weren't looking to change jobs, staff weren't leaving, so because they obviously couldn't, there was no way they could get another job somewhere else, so they stayed in the jobs that they had. So we didn't have any of the turnover of staff, we didn't have any of the recruitment and retention issues that we have. But as Vicky said, we had the other problem, which was how do you then start to maintain the communication within the organisation when the head office staff that we had to start working from home and so on, and we had to stop the traffic through the care home. So there was I hadn't been in a care home for like 14 months, which is unheard of. As a CEO of a company that runs 70 care homes, we did have people going in and out, but we were reducing that to the very minimum. So one of the things that we implemented was we implemented a daily phone call with the entire management teams of the homes. So at the time we had 70 care homes, there or thereabouts. And then there were the regional management in there were peripatetic managers in there were quality team in there were so on, everybody was on this call. So there was probably 80, 90, 100 people on this call every single morning. Every single morning we had this 100-person conference call from the date we started the pandemic. So actually, in a really bizarre way, when the pandemic struck and restrictions were imposed, our communication improved immensely. We issued FAQs that were updated daily.
Yeah.
So, people had a place to go to if they had any questions about the pandemic and about what that meant and what it meant about visiting and what it meant about isolating and shielding and blah, 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 testing. So we had the FAQs being issued, and we had this daily call. And actually, as we're coming out of this pandemic, what we're finding is that the managers are saying, can we carry on? Can we carry on with this daily call? Which is, great from my perspective, because actually it's a forum for everybody to share their current concerns and look for solutions. And actually what it's also demonstrated, I think, to a lot of staff is that it's that old story, isn't it? Everybody is scared sometimes to say that they've got problems because, they don't want to be the one that's weak or that doesn't know what they're doing. But actually what the call has done is it's shown everybody else that actually everybody else is in the same bloody boat and we've all got problems. And actually they all feel free now to say, yeah, me, I don't know. Has anybody got any ideas about this? And, in a way, it's improved things immensely. Have
you seen any problems in terms of the nurses, obviously, that you employ? I suspect there's a proportion that will be European. Have you seen any sort of change in turnaround in the numbers of headcount in terms of the nurses on the ground?
Well, I think Brexit's a different issue, isn't it? And we, as a business, as an industry sector, like leisure, I suppose, to some degree, we are reliant. I'll use the word. We're reliant on overseas staff. We recruit heavily as a sector from places like South Africa, the Philippines, as well as from Europe. And I've got two views about that. I think there's a short-term impact of Brexit. We have most of the staff that we currently have will have settled status. So, in fairness, that doesn't impact us. But actually, the future recruitment of staff perhaps will be a problem. But I think what it does is it brings into sharper focus the fact that we need to do more to make the profession more attractive to the people, our own workforce, our own domestic workforce. So we've had to think longer and harder about how we make caring particularly an attractive career. Now that's tricky. Nurses are slightly different, and I'll come to that in a second, but caring, definitely we've got to do more about making that a worthwhile occupation for people to want to be in. Now, not everybody's cut out to be a carer, trust me on that one. And we've got to be careful who we recruit. And in a bizarre way, I don't ever want this to be the kind of footballer salaries kind of career, because the wrong people do it for the wrong reasons. But we should be making it culturally seen as a more worthy occupation. So there's a different problem that we've got to resolve, and I hope this brings it into sharper focus. But with nurses are a totally different problem. It's a finite resource. We just do not have enough nurses in the country to meet the needs of both the NHS and the private sector. There aren't enough. So, and the problem is the lead time to create a nurse is several years, because it's the entry qualifications that are needed. So I think, again, what's happening to some degree is that we're looking again at vocational routes into nursing, which is great, and hopefully will lead back to that more than before. But in the meantime, we are still reliant on overseas nurses, and I think what the post-Brexit decisions have been around it being one of the professions that we would accept people to come in under the new immigration rules is a sensible kind of response to that. So I think in short, the simple answer to your question is that nurses, we need a longer term solution. We need to recruit, and we need to build more nurses, I think is the expression. But in the short term, I think there's an immigration issue to resolve that, allowances to resolve that. But carers is a more deep rooted problem. It's how do you make it, more attractive?
Tony, you guys are in a industry that's highly regulated and there's a lot of compliance. What are some of the issues when it comes down to the industry regulatory body, and also the impact of Brexit as well? Just touching on that again.
It's one of the most regulated businesses that you could be in, apart from running a nuclear reactor, I suspect. Although I don't know. Looking at some of the stuff that's gone on, we have, as you can imagine, we have a lot of regulation around that. One of the, I mean, some of the issues, Vicky, you can talk about this, but we have there are very strict controls over the checks that we need to do, and so on, and when we recruit people into the industry, we and references taken, and when people can join us and at what point, and so on and so forth. One of the biggest problems that I think I would suggest is that as the years go by, more and more regulation is being brought in around the operation of care services, and all of that regulation ultimately flows down to how the carers do their job and how they record what they're doing and how that is inspected and how that's judged. So whilst the profession has, well, the occupation, I suppose, as carer, not profession, but the occupation of being a carer has generally been considered, and it's not the right view, but it's generally being considered as a minimum wage, low paid job. Actually, incrementally, what we're asking of carers to do is far from a minimum wage job. It's a very responsible job, and it requires a lot of diligence, and it requires a lot of training, and there's a mismatch. So what I would say is that we're still living in a world where it's viewed as a low paid occupation. We're still living in a world where the fees generally reflect that we have carers on low pay, but actually the expectation from above is that actually these are people who are well trained and do a very diligent job that requires a bit more than the very basics. This is not packing boxes. Looking after people isn't packing boxes. I actually have done a stint as a carer in a care home, and I'll tell you now, I failed miserably in filling in the paperwork. Because you're run ragged. You're doing one thing 1 minute, you're asked by somebody, can you come and help me with this? You go and do that. You forgot to record what you did before. And before you know it, somebody's tapping you on the shoulder saying, why haven't you filled in your paperwork? You haven't done your notes and what have you. And I'm thinking, I'm the bloody CEO and I'm getting it wrong, and I'm not a stupid person. I've got, a degree, post-degree qualifications, blah, blah, blah. We ask a lot of these people.
Yeah.
Tricky.
Is there anything you'd like to add to that from compliance, being in HR? Obviously, no doubt, I'm sure you've got piles of paperwork.
Yeah, I mean, Tony touched on there about the pre-screening side of things for staff. I mean, everybody in HR has to go through that in terms of referencing, we have to have DBSs, but sometimes it can just take quite a long time because we can't afford to have any gaps at all with the people working in the care homes because of the people that they look after and the risks that could potentially bring if we don't follow the right procedures. So whereas if somebody's working in our head office, the checks are there, but they're not as stringent as they are within the care homes. So often we are looking for people to start almost straight away, but there's always that delay because of the DBSs, because of the we have to have enhanced DBSs, we have to have so many references. So it's just making sure that those processes are followed to the letter, as much as it can be frustrating for the delay in that person starting. We have to have that side of it absolutely spot on, because of the sensitivity of the people that we look after. So sometimes it can be frustrating just because of the length of time, but it's certainly something that we wouldn't shortcut, if you see what I mean, because it just is too good.
I've seen it done, and people have taken a flyer on bringing somebody in because they don't want to employ agency staff.
Yeah.
And it's backfired.
Yeah.
Very badly.
Interesting. So let's go a little bit commercial on this. How has that changed your ongoing expectations? Tony, as a investor and board member of staff and employees as well, particularly when you are in an industry that's really, again, low margin, high turnover to some degree?
Well, to try and understand the question, I suppose pay is our biggest problem. You know, it's our biggest single P&L category, and you know, nurses, as you've seen this year, you know, Scotland I think awarded 4% to NHS staff, England 2%, but you know, I think that's a bit of a misnomer. I mean, I've just literally just had to approve. Well, let's look at Scotland just as a micro for a minute. You know, in Scotland, fees, publicly funded fees for care homes are determined through a national care home contract. So every local authority has got together, they've agreed a single fee for residential care and a single fee for nursing care. And what they've done is they agreed an uplift in that fee, but the uplift was connected to pay. So basically what they said was, we will pay you this fee, but you have to pay all your nurses £16.75. So that immediately inflates pay for us. So, or did inflate pay for us. And it took us from whatever we were paying the nurses at the time to £16.75 an hour. The reality is we've just, for example, in our group, had to increase all of our nurses in Scotland to £19 an hour, simply because wage inflation in Scotland is just crazy. And, you know, what we're finding now in England, here's another great example across England. We have currently 14 vacancies for cooks or chefs within the care homes that we have. But of course, we're competing now with the leisure industry that's trying to get back up and running, and hotels that are springing up for staycations and so on. So, you know, trying to bring in cooks and chefs is getting harder, and the pay for those is getting higher and higher. And I looked at the Office for National Statistics site a week ago, and they were saying that in, I think it was February to May of this year, the annualized inflation for payroll was 5.7%, I think it said. You know, well, you know, when you look at that in terms of our fee increases, which have been averaging about 2.5%, it doesn't really match up. So, you know, those margins are getting squeezed even tighter. So, and I can see a situation now where privately funded, care homes that serve the private markets, who are commanding fees up to £2,000, £2,500 a week for care, you know, they can afford to pay £10, £12 an hour for carers, you know, where there's not a cat in hell's chance that if you're getting £550 or £600 a week for your residents, that you can afford to match that. So suddenly, you know, you're getting priced out of the market, and your margins are getting squeezed even harder. So I can see, and I don't know what all the people who are on this webinar are seeing, but I think that at the moment wage inflation is way outstripping RPI, CPI, or any other inflationary indicators, and I can see that will continue now for the next probably 12, 18 months. I don't see any reversal of that. And I think ultimately that will start to feed through into higher prices for everything, and then inflation will follow. So, you know, my prediction, if you like, is that it starts with pay, and we're seeing that. And I think in 18 months' time, we'll start to see that flow through in general inflation numbers.
Interesting. So here's one for you both. What's the key to a successful relationship between a chief exec and their HR director?
Handbags.
Handbags. Did you just say handbags?
I did.
Recently it was my birthday. That's what the present was from the company. So Tony knows how to treat a woman. But seriously, I think it's about regular communications in place. As Tony said, you know, he's he's a CEO, he's an entrepreneur, he's always thinking of different things to do, different things to bring into the business, which is absolutely fantastic. So we just need to have, or I just need to have that understanding of what Tony's thinking sometimes and what his plan is, so that if something comes in that's perhaps different to before, or that I'm ready for it. So I think it's just about knowing what he's thinking, communication, and for both of us to listen to feedback from clients and staff, so that we can ultimately, you know, be on the same page. You know, Tony and I, you know, speak often. We work very closely together. So it works for us. But I think you do have to have those communication channels, definitely.
I'd say it's a lot about, for me anyway, having the right person in that role that has an understanding about the business, not just about HR matters. You know, what I don't need is somebody to just read me the rule book. What I actually need is somebody with a bit more understanding of the commercial imperatives of the business. And I would say this to anybody who's on the webinar now, who's watching and participating. I've seen in my career a number of HR people achieving board level positions, and I can understand how and why that happens. Don't get any ideas, Vicky. I'm only kidding. Vicky's already the HR director. But my point is that I think for that to happen, as an HR person, you need to have a real commercial understanding and an instinct for what the business needs and how to deliver that. It's no good telling the board or the directors or whatever that the rules say this, because I can absolutely tell you that after 15, 20, 25, 30 years of being in business, we probably know most of the rules, you know, intuitively. What we actually need is somebody who knows the rules and will bring you a solution that will allow you to continue to run that business effectively. So if I come to Vicky and I say, so-and-so in whatever department is a pillar, and I need to get rid of him, pardon my French. I don't need Vicky to say, well, actually, you can't do that because this is that rule and that's that rule and so on. Or the process is this. What I actually need is somebody to say, the process is this, and there are a number of options that you can take, and the risks associated with each of those options is this, 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 and this. In order to achieve your objective, which is that you need to replace that person with somebody competent as soon as possible before any damage is done, then this is your best option. And that's the quantum of risk in terms of both percentage that it's likely to happen and cost ultimately. So, you know, if Vicky said to me that if you want to do that, then you can do A, B, and C, but there's a 10% chance that it's going to cost you up to £5,000, then that's exactly what I need from my HR team. You know, it's not the right thing to do, but the chances of you getting caught, you know, being taken to a tribunal are minimal. And if you did get taken to a tribunal, there's your outcome. So I've then got something I can work with. But just to give me the rules is pointless. So the successful relationship for me is having that kind of person at the other end of the phone.
That's very useful to know. And I suppose that was going to lead on to my sort of next question. In your opinion, how does the role of a HR director influence the strategic decisions you make? I suppose you've sort of put that into context around.
It's the other way around. Okay.
Yeah.
You know, I would say that, you know, if you've got a good HR person, and this goes back to treating people like adults. You know, if I've got the senior person in HR in our company is Vicky. Vicky knows the strategy for the company. It might change every week, but she knows it. You know, so I will share the strategy with Vicky, and Vicky therefore knows that we're all going to France. You know, that's the plan. So whenever a decision needs to be made, Vicky can look at that decision in the context of we're all trying to get to France. And because she shares that vision with us, she can make the right choices and give me the right information and the right advice. If I didn't share with her the vision, it's very difficult for Vicky to then give me the appropriate advice. And I think, you know, this is what annoys me a lot about companies that don't get this. If you want to succeed, you need a senior team, you need a core team at least, who utterly understand the vision of the business. And to be honest with you, I'd hope that we could cascade that through the whole team and everybody understands that we're going to France. You know, you know, my job as the company director is to assess whether France is the right place to go and why we want to get there and to make that decision. I then have, you know, a senior management team who will tell me what the best way of doing that is. And then we have a team of people below who will effectively do all the packing, buying the tickets and arranging the transport and everything else. You know, that's how businesses work. But if people don't know we're heading to France, they're just packing, they don't know where we're going. We're going to end up arriving in France and I've got bloody, you know, furs and snowshoes and, you know, all the rest of it. You know, I'm using an analogy here and I'm probably overdoing it a bit, but you get my message. You know, people need to share the vision.
What things do you believe, Tony, that the care sector, people from other industries could learn from the care sector, in your view?
I think, right, the simple thing, and this I'm speaking from my position or our position as HCMS, I think what people could learn is we have to be, as Vicky said, we have to be very, very careful on our recruitment. We are forced to by regulation. And I think people outside of the sector need to do that too. But one of the things the care sector does better than I think a lot of other sectors is because of the necessity to meet so many regulations, we are very, very effective at auditing what we do. Very, very few businesses that I've ever known do the in-depth auditing on a regular basis that happens in care homes. And that auditing includes HR issues and it includes quality issues, it includes admin issues, marketing. You know, our audit covers the whole spectrum. It's a real drains up and we do that regularly. And we do it because we have to because we have to meet so many standards and so many people's expectations, external people's expectations. And I think other businesses don't do that on a regular basis. If you've got a factory and what you do is you buy bulk kibble for dogs and you repack it and you sell it as dog chow or whatever it is, and you sell it out to, and I've done this by the way, not kibble, but fish food. But I was a lot younger then. But if you do that, then you just do it. You just go out and you do a deal on the stuff you're buying and you repack it and your packing machines and your printing machines, stuff like that. I never bloody thought to audit the business ever in any sense. Why would I? I mean, what am I auditing? But actually, every so often, if we'd had a bigger business and there were more employees, we needed to sit down and do an audit. Have we done all of our supervisions? Have we done all of our, you know, have we looked again at our job descriptions? And are we making sure that people are delivering where they need to deliver, and et cetera, et cetera. And I think a lot of businesses could learn a lot from the way we have to manage our business. And that would bring that rigor that we talked about right at the very beginning. You know, right at the very beginning, we said, you know, how has poor, you know, it was phrases, how often has poor HR contributed to the poor commercial performance of the organization? Poor HR contributes to the poor performance in a variety of different sectors, but nobody's doing the auditing to make sure the HR's done properly.
Mm. Vicky, is there anything else you would add to that as well?
I think one of the other things I would add is where Tony talks about auditing and the processes we have to go through. But one of the things that we do as well is that we do a lessons learned. If something went wrong, or if just, you know, a process, an incident, is to always reflect on that and look at what could be learned from those things that have taken place. And I think that's been a big thing for us, alongside the auditing, is to make sure that we do reflect on things that perhaps haven't gone as well as we would hope, or if something's happened. I don't think many companies do that either. I might be wrong, but companies I've worked for certainly haven't. And I think that's been really good for us, because it's helped us improve or make changes where needed. And I think it makes a real difference if you also reflect on things that haven't gone as well.
I think maybe, Vicky, part of that is that And there are businesses, trust me, there are lots of businesses where they have high risks, but we are a very high risk business. And when things don't go well as they should, and I'm going to use that expression, even though what I'm about to tell you makes that seem quite, ridiculous. The consequences are horrendous. And so, I'm going back not very far at all to a situation where a gentleman in a care home fell from a first floor window. The gentleman died. Now, there are huge, as you can imagine, implications for that. Not just to the family and the relatives, the friends, the staff group. The consequences for health and safety issues and so on. They're just so immense. Very traumatic situation. And I will just say in that particular instance that it actually came down to a properly qualified installer of the windows not having done the job they should have done. That was impossible for anybody to know. But the lessons learned bit around that and the HR bit around that for us is 100% absolutely has to happen. So there's a lot of reasons for that. It's not just about trying to apportion blame and trying to make sure it doesn't happen again for us. There's actually a bit about the mental health and well-being of the two staff who were on duty at that particular point in time. Mm-hmm. About the poor cook who happened to be in the car park and watched the guy fall from the window. So there's almost like this sort of counselling and well-being and follow-up and all the rest of it to try and make sure that there's no lasting mental damage done, psychological damage done. So and I think that you can say the same as in building and scaffolding and all the rest of it. There are other industries where accidents can happen that are quite a bit serious. But it's not the same if you're a photocopier manufacturer or you install drinks machines or whatever. It rarely happens. And so I think there are some very stark contrasts to what we do sometimes.
We spoke about a few cost implications as well, but I'm really interested to get your thoughts on sort of trends you're seeing in terms of pay and reward. And I know we spoke a bit about inflation in Scotland as well, but is there, in terms of reward, what are you starting to see? Is there a impact there that you're seeing across the business?
Well, in pay terms,
but also reward. How else are you rewarding people? Obviously people are being rewarded in different ways now.
I know, and I've had to start being nice to people, which is killing me. But what I would say is, don't talk about my HR files, Vicky. It's not.
No.
No. On a serious note, we've been agonizing, I would say is the word, over that particular issue for a lot of years, because we're not in a position to be able to inflate people's pay. So how do we give them something that will provide them with a benefit that isn't a direct or huge cost to the business? In our own business, HCMS, if we go back, oh God, I can't even think how many years it is now, Vicky, but if we go back a long time ago, we were in a position where we weren't able to give people huge pay increases, even though in the market rate for regional managers and for operational people particularly was quite robust. So we found ways to give other benefits like health and medical cover, and Vicky managed to find a benefits, what they call the benefits hub, I think it is, that provides us with a number of benefits like discounts in retail and for leisure tickets and that sort of thing, which is worth having. So we're just looking at other ways. But I'd also say that one of the things that as an organisation we would look at is supporting people through personal development. And that to me is a fantastic solution to the problem, which is not everybody will want to do it. So it's not inflating costs across the board. I'm looking at this from a commercial point of view as well, by the way. So you offer to support people in their own particular personal ambitions. And that might be something like weight loss. It might be getting fit. It might be becoming a bit more disciplined in their day-to-day work practice. It might be they want to do an NLP course. It might be whatever. So we will look at personal development as well as other skills. And what will happen is that maybe 5, maybe 10% of the workforce will take that up. But that has a way of lifting morale across the entire business, because people will know that this is an organization that is prepared to support development. So even if they're not getting it, you're getting a benefit from the people who are not taking it, if you see what I mean. That's the first thing. The second thing is, for those who do take it, you end up with better people working for you. Because not only are they happy that they've got some personal self-development, but actually they're better people working for you. So they're more disciplined, they're happier in themselves because they're losing the weight they wanted to lose wherever, or they're fitter, so I think those are the kinds of benefits that I would always say to people, really consider. I know it's a cost, but you'll find it's a lot cheaper than just giving everybody another 20 pence an hour or another $5,000 a year or whatever it is you're gonna offer. And so yeah, there's a lot of that as well.
So I've got last 2 questions. So how are you closing the gap in a talent pool that's relatively quickly disappearing, particularly in terms of frontline key workers? And what do you think some of those solutions are to those problems? And that's just not in the care sector, that's hospitality, retail. I mean, what are your thoughts around that?
Vicky?
Yeah, so recruitment is always tricky in the care industry and in other industries as well. And, we have to look outside of the box sometimes, or think outside of the box if we can, to try and entice people in. As Tony mentioned earlier, we have to make care or a carer role more appealing to people. And maybe in some way through the pandemic and the exposure to frontline workers, not just in the NHS but in the care sector, that hopefully that has helped a little bit. We rely on a lot of our staff referring people that they know, and we've got a good refer a friend scheme, and we know that people that are referred generally are good people because they're the people that have got family members that are working there. So we do rely quite heavily on our existing staff to bring people into us. But we hold a lot of open days, recruitment days in the homes, when we're able. Obviously the pandemic has stopped that, to try and advertise, and so people can see what it's like in the care home, get to meet our residents. This was probably a bit more before pandemic, but we are starting to get back into it, and to just try and show what we offer as working. As Tony said, the pay for the care staff isn't good. Most of the carers that work for us, or the staff that work for us, do it because they love the job they do. So it's just trying to think of different ways to get people to understand that. And like I said, we have to rely on a lot of our existing staff, but we do recruitment days. We keep a passive portal of candidates that have come, maybe come to us at a different point. So it's just trying to think outside the box. So I have a recruitment person that works in my team, and she's always looking at different people, different things to do. She headhunts people in roles that we need it to do. She stalks everyone. She stalks just about everyone that she's ever come across in terms of trying to find the right people. But I'm not going to lie, it's hard. It's hard in that sector and on that front line, because we just don't. Perception or public perception is not that great, which is completely wrong.
I think it's very important as well, Vicky, isn't it, that we emphasize, and we look for the different ways of promoting the particular roles that we're talking about. So for example, we talked earlier on about I talked a little bit about catering staff across the group. Now, how do you compete in a difficult market with a very short supply of a very small pool of talent? Well, to my mind, we can emphasize the specific advantages of working as a chef or a cook in a care home, and that is the hours aren't unsociable as they are in restaurants and pubs. Yeah. You're not working until bloody midnight, or 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock at night, So first of all, that's a big tick, more sociable hours. Secondly, you've actually got less fluctuation in the number of covers that you're trying to deal with every day. You know how many covers you're going to deal with. It's going to be, if you've got a 40-bed care, I mean, it's 40 people for lunch. It's 40 people for breakfast. So actually your day is not as frantic, and you're not having to spend quite so much time managing stocks and managing, wastage and that sort of thing, which you do have to do if you're a chef in a normal restaurant or a cafe or a kitchen or whatever. So, it's trying to pick out the advantages of doing this particular role. If you want, I mean, sit me in front of anybody who's ever considered to be, being a carer, and I'm pretty certain I can convince them to go and give it a shot, because I tell you something now, if I wasn't sat in this chair, having done the job, I loved it. There is no more rewarding thing in the world than have somebody who needs assistance put their trust and faith in you to deliver that every day. It's not like working, it's hard, don't get me wrong, it's blinking hard work, but actually, it's working in somebody's house, it's working with people who become your friends and part of your family. It's like going to your second home. It's not like going to the office, and if you've ever wanted a job, then, and you're not sure about it, I would say, you need to have there's a certain something about you that you need to have. But other than that, give it a shot. You'll love it, So it's about being able to communicate that and passion, and that difference. Other than that, you just can't, I can't go out there and say, what's everybody else paying? I'll pay more.
Yeah, I just think you just sold the job of being a chef really well. I hope you're changing your job spec based on what you've just said there, because it sounded enticing, that's for sure. Didn't sound like a lot of hours. Here's my last question for you. Try keeping this quite broad as well, but what's your views on how digital technology is disrupting particularly the care sector as well? And I know I'm focusing on the care sector a lot. And what does that mean in terms of the skills and expertise that you'll need moving forward?
Okay, I'm going to give you 2 minutes and then I'm going to hand over to Vicky. But my 2 minutes is this, that bizarrely, as technology advances, the specific skills you need are diminishing. The reality is, if most of you out there who are watching have got an iPhone or a whatever it is phone, an Android phone, I'll bet you a pound to a penny, not one of you has ever read a manual on how to use that phone. It's probably the most advanced piece of technology that you will ever clap your hands around, but you will never have read a manual. So as we get technologically better, the need for people to have specific skills is diminishing, because the technology is filling that gap. It's making it more intuitive. It's making it easier to use. I mean, everybody now of our generation knows that a little triangle arrow pointing to the right means play. So you design something with that button on it, people just go, yeah, I know what that does. And so the training needs become much, much less as technology develops. So yeah, I'd say, bizarrely, we're needing less technologically skilled people, because technology is making up the difference. Now, what do you say, Vicky?
Well, I think in terms of technology for our staff, particularly in the care homes, we do a mixture. If we talk about training, we do a mixture of blended training. So we do online training, we do some face-to-face, but our online training can be accessed through the web, but also on people's phone. So they do their training on their phone, which makes it a lot more accessible to them. They can do it if they're in work, if they're out working, it's so easy for them to be able to do that now. And like Tony said, you know, most of us have got an iPhone or an Android or whatever that is. So for us, from a training point of view, technology has been really good. We've had a lot more uptake on our training compliance because it's accessible. They haven't just got to sit at a computer, and if they're in the care home, they have to try and find a computer that's free. So we've had our compliance increase because they've got it at their fingertips, basically, which has been really helpful for us. I can communicate a lot through our platform that we've got online, send messages to the whole of our care staff, give information, lots of different things. So for me, from a technology point of view, I think it's really helped. We do competency training online as well, and it just makes things a lot more interesting because they're looking at pictures rather than just reading words. So for me, I think it's been a positive in regards to our training, and people absolutely love it. You know, we've had a lot more positive feedback since we've had it in people being able to do training than we have done it in the past, where they're fighting to reach a computer for it to work for them. So for me, it's been quite positive.
Yeah.
Craig, I think you we're going to ask some questions, but I think we're done with the questions I had. Is there any other questions anybody else wants to ask? Or Craig, I know you said you had a couple.
I've got a couple. Yeah, there's no more on the chat at the moment, but one of them was particularly about COVID vaccinations. So obviously it's a massive issue currently in the sector. The sector's been picked out as the government guinea pig to be the first sector to have compulsory vaccinations. Looks like it's going through Parliament, went through Commons this week, probably in the House of Lords next week. What do you think the implications are for your own companies in your portfolio?
Can I start by saying it wasn't something I would have supported. I'm not a fan of mandating stuff. I think in the fullness of time, the implication of it will be limited, very limited. But there will be some people who will leave. There's no doubt about it, because they don't want to be vaccinated. But it'll be very, very few people. By the time the mandating of this happens, people have just resigned themselves to the fact that actually they need to do it. And, you know, with 60 million vaccinations we've given in this country already or something, you know, we're not seeing bodies piled high in the streets as a consequence of that. You know, if you look at, I know there's been widely publicised issues around blood clots, but actually, if you look at the statistics, you've got more chance of being crushed by a grand piano tomorrow than you have of dying of a blood clot from the vaccination. So, and I think people are starting to see that. And I also think that the lunacy on the web of scaremongering and misinformation is dying out, because it's almost like people have got bored now. So there's an element of that as well. So that's our start point was always persuade and point people to the right information and encourage, but don't mandate. You know, who are we to tell people what they should do with their bodies? That said, we only really took that position about people who were already employed. We chose to take a view that if we were going to employ somebody, then the no jab, no job kind of policy would be relevant, because you can make a choice at that point whether you want to take the job, which means you have to be vaccinated, or whether you don't take the job. Once you're in the job, forcing people to do it is a different issue again. So, that was always our approach. But Vicky, what's the current statistics for vaccinated? We're doing really well.
Well, within our head office function, it's almost 99. Well, I think it is 99% now. In our care homes, it's at 84%, which is really good. And we are already starting to see that shift of people that were refusing to now that it's looking to be mandatory come October, already changing their minds because they know that it's coming. So we did have some refusals, non-medical purposes for reasons. but we've started to see a shift, and that number is dropping. I think the other thing that's potentially helping is that you potentially need those vaccinations to go abroad. So when that sort of started being a bit more said, we've seen a shift in that as well, where people know that they need it to go away. So I'm convinced that, I think Tony's right. I think we will see people go. We have got those people that categorically won't have it, and they'll wait right until the end and they'll leave. But I think that shift is already changing, and I think before much longer we'll be pretty much or thereabouts. So I don't think we'll ever be 100%, but I think because we've got medical exemptions as well. But I think the shift is changing from our sector anyway.
I think you're right, Vicky. When the ticket to Torremolinos is linked with your jab, yeah. Also,
as well, from the 16th of August, you don't have to self-isolate unless you're positive yourself if you've been double vaccinated. So I think that's gonna help a lot of people as well make decisions to have that vaccine, because they won't have to stay in the house and not be able to go out for 10 days. So I think there's things coming into play that's going to help.
One of the other things, Craig, that we did with our members of staff, and it wasn't deliberate, but it was part of the process of explaining the situation to staff from very early on, is we said, because I don't know whether any of you out there have ever been in any, or you work in positions or places where you've had to wear PPE permanently, but actually wearing a mask for an 8 or 10 hour shift is not pleasant at all. It really isn't. Putting on it really makes me very, very irritated when people complain about putting it on for 5 minutes while they dive into a shop. You try wearing it for a bloody 8 hour shift or a 12 hour shift. It's horrendous. And what we said to people was, you've got every right to refuse the vaccination, but if you're not vaccinated, we have a responsibility as an employer to protect you as much as possible. And therefore, even after restrictions are lifted, you're going to end up having to continue to wear PPE if you're not vaccinated. And I'll tell you what, that's encouraging. People don't really want to do that. Yeah. So
it's a massive issue, isn't it? And I think it's the thin end of the wedge. I think it'll come into other sectors as well. So I think the care sector is just the start. And my last question is about hybrid working, which is on the lips of many HR people at the moment. Yeah. Is that even a possibility in the care sector?
In the care homes, it's less of an option, obviously, because we're in there looking after the residents that live there. So it's definitely not feasible.
Can't do that remotely.
not feasible to do that. But from our head office point of view, we have about 104 staff at our head office, and as Tony touched on earlier, back in March last year, it was literally up, go, or we go from home. And to be honest, that was a real shift for us. We'd never done that before. We were always in the office 5 days a week unless we were out into the homes. It was just the way that we worked, and it always worked well. But obviously since March last year, we've been working from home, and very few people have been into the office. We've had to call people in, the staff that we need to be there. And we have made the decision to continue that going forward. We are asking people to come in at least twice a week, but that the rest of the week that they can work from home, because we've been able to see very clearly that it's been a benefit to our business. It's worked really, really well, and perhaps something that we'd never considered before. And I think people have really appreciated the fact that they can have that bit of balance, bit of work-life balance. Helps with family issues. It helps with car journeys, pollution, all sorts of benefits that come from having a bit of both. And it's gone down really well with our staff, to be honest. And
you can park in the car park.
Yeah, you don't have to block anybody in anymore. But we found, we've done a lot of communication with our head office staff. We've had a lot of surveys go out, and the surveys that we've had back have all talked about how the flexible working will continue, and how that's made a positive impact on them. So for us, it will continue.
One thing I will just add, though, Craig, is that managing people, we've not seen a drop in performance output. We've not seen a drop in productivity, and that's one of the reasons why I think we're happy to continue. And I think you have to understand and manage that. You know, one of the things that we've said to the team is that this is done. It's not contractual. It's done at the discretion of the organisation, and that we reserve the right to go back to full-time working in the office, because I think whilst it's clearly suited the vast majority of our staff, there are some people who are not self-starters who find it quite difficult to drive themselves to the same kind of output that they would normally produce. And I think the managers of the department heads that we've got have got an additional challenge in how to change their working practice to manage their teams. So whilst if you're sat in an open office and you've got your 5 team members sat around you, you can hear what they're saying on the phone. It's easy to lean across and just ask a question and you can get the answer. When they're working remotely, all of those things vanish. So how do you manage and monitor that? So I think there's certainly a part that the HR department needs to play here in identifying the skill needs that the management and department heads need, and helping them through the process of how to continue to manage their team when they're working remotely. It's a different skill, and not everybody's got it. And you know that you can't just assume that's okay and it's going to work. Yeah.
No, that's very true, isn't it? And I think a lot of companies are finding that and having to adjust their management style. But good to hear that you've had a positive impact from it.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to move us to close now because it's fast approaching 6 o'clock. So first of all, can I just give a big thank you to Tony, Vicky and Kay for a really interesting discussion. I think we've got a lot of insight into the care sector and also some learnings for other sectors as well, particularly in frontline businesses. The recording of this event will shortly be available, and that will be made available on our website. So obviously for everyone on the webinar, but also people who registered will be able to have a look at that too. And just a reminder that our next event is actually in 2 weeks' time. It's on July the 28th, and we'll be talking about hybrid and virtual onboarding. And the session is going to be led by Chris Jones from a business called Onboarder, which is the UK's leading experience-driven onboarding platform. Senior HR leaders from Reward Gateway and Go Cardless will be part of the speaker panel as well. So it promises to be a great session. I hope to see many of you there. And until then, bye for now. Thank you from all the panelists, and thank you for joining.